Country clearance for this posting. Indefinite. No curtailment date. That's the first time I've written that in 37 years without a return cable. A cable. That's what we called them. Diplomatic cables. Dispatches sent between embassies and the Department of State in Washington. Every single one had the same structure. To, from, subject, classification, unclassified through top secret. The content varied enormously. Political analysis, security threat assessments, requests for emergency country clearance, recommendations on bilateral frameworks. But the format never changed. The format was the point. Emotion didn't travel in cables. Opinion survived only when it could be properly classified and documented. Whatever you actually felt about what you were reporting out there in the field, that's not in the cable. I sent 23,000 of them. Give or take. My name is Robert Garrett, Bob. I worked for the United States Department of State for 37 years. Foreign Service Officer, FS-01, which is as high as you go without a Senate confirmation hearing. Almaty, Kazakhstan. Beijing, Nairobi, Budapest, and finally here, Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. Deputy Chief of Mission, 2018 to 2021. The DCM. The number 2, the one who runs the embassy when the ambassador is in Washington, explaining to a subcommittee why the situation on the ground is more nuanced than it appears. I retired in July 2021. I was back in Columbus, Ohio by September. For the first time since 1994, I lived in America for longer than 6 months. The wood inside the stove takes longer in this cold. -22. The felt on the walls absorbs sound differently when it drops below -20. You can feel the silence pressing inward, like the step is holding its breath. I've been awake since 5:45. The fire went out sometime around 3. By the time I noticed, the air inside had dropped to just above freezing, and my fingers were already too stiff to grip the matches cleanly. You know what's almost comical? I spent 37 years negotiating the terms of other people's discomfort. Presidential suites in Almaty, black cars in Beijing, a residence in Budapest where the staff changed the linens every morning whether they needed it or not. I signed my first diplomatic cable in 1984 in Washington, D.C., with hands that had never been cold a day in their lives. This morning, those same hands couldn't get a grip on the fire poker without stopping twice. Linda Sue Garrett, née Sullivan, had married an FSO in 1982. She knew what she was marrying. That's what I told myself for 37 years. She knew. She chose it. She packed the boxes. In Columbus and Almaty and Beijing and Nairobi and Budapest and Ulaanbaatar, she found the international schools for Eric and Claire. She made friends in every city who she would then have to leave when the posting ended. She built a home and surrendered it, moved to the next one, and built another. I arrived at each posting, unpacked, attended the country team briefing by Monday, and was operational by Tuesday. What I didn't understand, what I somehow managed not to understand for 37 years, is that there's a difference between being posted somewhere and inhabiting a place. I was posted, Linda inhabited. In every city, every apartment, every residence, she was there. Present in the way you have to be present when you're the one building the life. I was present in the way that a consul is present at a National Day reception, physically in the room, professionally attentive, never actually in the conversation. My colleagues at the State Department considered me excellent company. Bob Garrett, the man who listens to everything and reveals nothing. In diplomatic circles, that's a compliment. You don't get to FS-01 by being transparent. You get there by understanding what the other side wants to believe and offering them just enough of it to maintain the relationship. After a while, it stops being a technique. It becomes the only language you know. The dinner table at home becomes a bilateral meeting. Your wife's question about whether you're happy becomes a formal démarche that requires a measured, non-committal response that preserves optionality. Your children asking why you seem far away becomes an intercept that gets compartmentalized and filed under matters not requiring immediate action. Linda called our marriage a safe house once. I thought she meant it as a compliment. Neutral ground, off the record, outside the official record. She meant, The real conversation never happened. In 40 years, I never filed a cable that said what I actually meant. I ran our marriage the same way. What Linda needed in those moments, what Eric and Claire needed, what any of them needed, was presence that didn't come classified. Feeling that didn't require a proper subject line before it could be expressed. That's not in the cable. That was never in any cable I wrote. March 8, 2022, Tuesday morning, Columbus, Ohio. Linda was at the kitchen counter facing the window. She had a coffee mug in her hand, the one she'd bought at a market in Budapest that said something in Hungarian neither of us had ever thought to translate. She didn't turn around when I came in. She said, "I followed you everywhere, Bob. I just stopped following you here." I understood. 37 years of reading subtext in political dispatches, and I understood her completely in one sentence. Part of me, the diplomatic part, recognized the position as irrebuttable. She had exhausted the available options. The parties were too far apart for further negotiation, and she had correctly concluded that fact before entering the room. This wasn't the conversation. This was the notification that the conversation had already happened, somewhere inside her, over the previous 7 months, while I sat in the same house and didn't notice. I didn't argue. I poured myself coffee and I sat down. That's not what she needed. I understood that too. But the format I had for responding, cables, structured communication, measured and classified, had no field for what the moment required. No TU, no subject, no action category. Just a woman standing at a window holding a coffee mug she'd carried from Budapest, asking me to finally, after 40 years, be in the room. I sat down and drank my coffee and didn't know how to be in the room. 2 weeks later, my son Eric called from Portland. He's 42, an architect, someone who builds things that stay in one place. He asked, "How are you really doing, Dad?" And I stood there in that Columbus kitchen with the phone pressed against my ear, and I had nothing. 37 years of structured professional communication, cables with headings, classifications, action-required fields, and I had no format whatsoever for that question. How are you really doing? There is no classification for that. There is no to field for what was actually happening inside me in that moment. There is no recommended action. I stayed on the line for 10 seconds without speaking. Eric said, "Dad?" I said I was fine. He said, "Okay. How are you really doing?" That's not in the cable. There is no cable for that. I came back to Mongolia in August 2022. I'd been here before as DCM. I knew the country, knew a handful of people outside the embassy compound, knew what the winters actually meant outside the residence with its central heating and its kitchen staff. I found a family in the Tuul River Valley, 55 kilometers north of the city. The family's name is Gantolga. They had a ger to rent. I took it. A ger is 6 meters across, felt walls over a wooden lattice frame, a cast iron stove in the center, one door painted orange-red always opening east, no reliable Wi-Fi, no insulation between you and a sky that goes to -35 in February. The temperature inside falls to near freezing within 2 hours if the stove goes out. Every morning I get up at 5:45 and relight it. Not because someone assigned me to this posting, not because there's a country team briefing Monday morning, because if I don't, I'll be cold, and that's the only reason I need. There is a woman in the Gantolga family, Noman, 78 years old, Sevigmid's grandmother. We don't share enough language for any conversation of substance. She speaks Mongolian. I have perhaps 40 words in working order. Every morning, without exception, she comes out of the main ger and points at me. Just points at me and raises her eyebrows. The gesture is universal. Did you sleep? Are you cold? Do you need something? The first month, I answered the way I'd learned to answer in 37 years of professional life. Fine, good, managing. The diplomatic non-answer that closes a line of inquiry without creating any new obligation on either side. By the third month, I started answering honestly. Some mornings I'd shake my head. She'd nod. She'd gesture toward the stove, then walk back inside. No follow-up questions. No assessment of whether I was operationally stable. No cable required. In 37 years of professional life, every communication had an objective. objective. Every question contained a sub-agenda, even the personal ones, especially the personal ones. How are you doing, Bob? Meant, are you functional? Are you going to create problems for the mission? Do I need to manage you this week? Noman asks if I slept because she wants to know whether I slept. There is no TO, no subject, no classification. 8 months in, I finally stopped answering in cable format. My daughter Claire asked me last October on a video call why I'd come back here after the divorce. She meant it kindly. She has her mother's way of asking questions that contain the answer she's already arrived at. Eric had asked the same thing differently. Dad, you don't have a posting anymore. He meant it practically. And he was completely right. I'm not DCM here. I'm not assigned to anything. There's no country team briefing Monday morning, no armored vehicle outside, no badge that gets me through the embassy gate, no secure communications room where the cables come in overnight and the duty officer leaves a summary on your desk by 7 a.m. He was right. That's exactly why. In the afternoons I practice Mongolian calligraphy, not the Romanized transliteration, the actual Cyrillic Mongolian script. I bought a notebook in the city. My letters are uneven and slow. Sevegmed's youngest son, who is 9, laughs every time he walks past and sees me bent over it, pen moving a centimeter at a time. Not unkindly. He just thinks it's funny that someone my age is learning to write like a child. He's not wrong. I spent my career writing 23,000 cables with the fluency of a man who had no other language. Every thought compressed into proper structure, every observation classified before it could be expressed, every feeling reformatted until it was suitable for transmission. Out here I'm learning to write one word at a time, and the letters come out crooked, and no one receives them, and that turns out to be the point. Linda asked me once, this was 2009, Nairobi, the middle of a security crisis. I was coordinating the evacuation of 340 American civilians, and I was reading cable traffic when she came into the room. She asked if I was happy. I said something about the operational demands of the current situation. She nodded once. She left. She didn't ask again for a long time. I think she already knew. I think she'd known for years. The answer wasn't in anything I said. The answer was that I didn't know, that I had spent so long compressing everything into proper format, classified, archived, transmitted, filed, that I had lost the original draft, the raw version, the one that existed before I knew how to structure it. In 37 years, I never filed a cable that said what I actually meant. I ran our marriage the same way. The real dispatch never left the building. In Mongolian, the word for is, exists, am, are, here, is bina, bina. It ends almost every basic sentence in the language. The sky is blue, tingir tingir ben. The stove is warm, zoch dolam ben. I am here, biend ben. I am here. This morning, Noman came out at her usual time and pointed at me. I hadn't slept well. I shook my head. She looked at me for a moment, not with concern exactly, not with the kind of institutional concern I spent a career receiving and performing, just with the straightforward acknowledgement of someone who asked a question and received an honest answer. She gestured toward the stove. Then she went back inside. I sat down on the wooden step outside the gare with my calligraphy notebook and my pen. The step in the early morning in April still holds the cold like it's reluctant to let it go. The smoke from the Gantolga Gare 50 meters away moves straight up in the still air. Somewhere past the ridge to the north, a horse made a sound I've stopped trying to identify. I opened the notebook to a blank page. Linda asked me once if I was happy. I filed a cable. Out here the answer takes one word. 8 months in, I'm learning to write it.